competition as well?
Yes, there's a world. In the past, I think maybe 5 or 6 years, Sundance added a world cinema documentary competition as well.
You know, we've heard, getting back to the subject of this film, we have heard that anecdotally, that people may not necessarily use the Death with Dignity Act in Oregon, but just knowing that they have the drugs there makes them more comfortable. Did you find that in your research and filmmaking?
Well, it is true that there are people who get the medication. You know, there's no requirement that if you get the medication, you have to take it. And there are certainly people who get the medication who go that far and don't use it. I think that, I don't know what the exact statistic is now, but I think it's around 60% of the people who get the medication now actually use it. And the remaining 40% don't. And in my experience, the majority of the people that I filmed with over this, 3.5, 4 year period did not use the medication actually. And most were, I think, reluctant to do so. And just as you said, they had it there, I think, in case things got really bad. Sometimes these were people who had experienced very tragic and painful deaths in their family or amongst friends. And so they saw what that could look like, and that ultimately led them to get the medication.
Cody Curtis, and we talked about in the first segment, 54-year-old Portlander with liver cancer, she said that it was comforting to know the drugs were there. You know what was really compelling, one of the most compelling moments is when you were interviewing Cody, I think it was in her house, she was having incredible pain. I mean, you can see she had a recurrence of liver cancer. They really couldn't do anything beyond that point. And, how was it for you to sit there and expand that question? How was it for you to delve into the subject of life and death, and how did it change you?
Well, it was something I considered really carefully, I think, before I went into making this film. I was pretty young when I started it. I was 27 years old. So there were certainly a lot of people that warned me, that, Peter, do you really want to make this film? Because you're going to experience, of course, death. And not only that, but you will grow very close to people and then ultimately lose them. So it was something that I really considered for a long period. It was about a year, actually, before I decided, once I had the idea to make the film, before I started making it. And, ultimately, I think as a filmmaker, you sometimes just feel so called to tell a story. And I felt so passionately about telling this story that I kind of just went beyond that. And in terms of the lessons I've learned from the film, I think that there are some lessons I've learned now, but in a way they have a lot more to do with life and living than they do death and dying. And I think in a way the film could almost be called How to Live in Oregon, because it really does explore this idea and this period of you've been given a terminal diagnosis, but you still have time.
Right.
And then the question is, well, how do you spend that time? And how do you live each day? And also, what was important to you in your life? And I think that the journey of people in the story is really that journey of really finding out what's most important today and in my life today, and what was most important in the life that I led.
Did you come up with the title How to Die in Oregon? Did you think of changing it after you filmed?
I don't think we thought of changing it after we filmed. It's a difficult title. It's a challenging title.
Sure.
It's a difficult title to film,
Right.
film to title, I think, because, I didn't. I think my main concern is I didn't want to be euphemistic in talking about something that I felt that we needed to have a really kind of unflinching look at. Exactly.
And a form of death needs to be in the title.
So
here.
I just wanted to kind of announce that this is what this film is going to be like.
Our guest filmmaker, Peter Richardson, How to Die in Oregon, his film. It's going to debut on HBO on May 26. Peter, one of the more interesting I found the entire film interesting, but one of the more compelling things to me was the political process, because I'm on here Monday through Friday talking about politics in Oregon and around the country, and the story of Nancy and Randy and how the version of Death with Dignity became law in Washington State. That is a very compelling portion of the film.
Yeah, Nancy's is an incredible story. This is a woman whose husband died of brain cancer, and her promise that she made to her husband and his dying wish was that she would pass a law like Oregon's in Washington State, because he wanted to use Oregon's law. But
he wanted to move there, but the time he had left, he couldn't have established residency in Oregon.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. So Nancy then goes on this campaign as part of the I-1000 initiative in Washington, which was ultimately successful in passing a law like Oregon's, and campaigns really telling her husband's story. And it is an incredible story. Nancy's an extraordinary woman, does something that I think that few people could do, taking really just incredible tragedy in her life and then going out and telling that story and using it to kind of change hearts and minds. I think it's an incredible journey, and it's a remarkable thing. Washington was only the second state to pass this law. There are very, very few places in the world still where this is legal.
When you see anyone going through photographs and their loved one has died, it kind of tugs at your heart. And there's this scene with Nancy there going through the photographs of her late husband, Randy. And when she pulls out the photograph of when he got this disease, and then not long after that, how he had aged. And she said they asked for his Medicare card, and he wasn't even 65, but they thought he was 80. I believe he had, spinal cord cancer?
Yeah, brain cancer.
But looking at these photographs of how this changed his life and her really description of the pain he went through and the begging to die, I mean, it has an impact when you see the individual stories that you'll never get from us just talking about pain.
Right, exactly. It's the reality of it. And even I should say that, the film can go a long ways towards portraying what Nancy went through, but ultimately the experience of what she went through is something much greater. It was an awful, awful death, and the photographic documentation, the way that Nancy had of this transformation that Randy underwent. As you said, there was 1 year he was this great looking guy, 50s, kind of looks like Tom Selleck, and then literally a year later, he was checking into the hospital, and they were asking him for his Medicare card because the woman at the check-in thought he was an 85-year-old man. So over 1 year, it's brain cancer especially. It's just a truly, truly ravaging and awful disease.
Our guest, the director and filmmaker Peter Richardson, his film How to Die in Oregon debuts on HBO on May 26th tonight. There'll be a screening at the Oregon Convention Center. It is sold out. Peter and HBO are hosting that tonight. What about the influence of this film? We know Oregon and Washington in this country. Do you see, and have you been asked to use this film by organizations around the country to promote death with dignity laws? What do you envision for the power of your work here as far as juxtaposing with a political process?
Well, I think my hope for the film is, I didn't really set out to make a political film. I really set out to make kind of a film that was more the personal stories of these people in Oregon who were considering this. And I think that for the most part, the people in the film also had that same mission, that they wanted to share their stories with other people who may be facing terminal illnesses, whether or not they live in a state like Oregon that has this law, and that they might have some comfort in seeing the story of another person who is going through something very similar to them. So I think that's, kind of the primary goal in a way. And then I think the larger goal is that the film really fosters a discussion about this issue in particular. But it also has to be said that there are only two states with this law.
Right.
And, Vermont just recently was the third to seriously consider it, but it was in the state legislature, and the state legislature just finished their session and they didn't pass it. So it could be some time before another state seriously considers this law. So I think in the meantime, there's another mission for the film, and that is to foster a conversation about this larger issue of death and dying, which is a critical one for our country to have. In 20 years, 1/5 of our U.S. population is going to be over the age of 65, which is a staggering statistic. So now is the time for us to have a conversation about not just Oregon's law, but about this larger issue of death and dying.
Fantastic talking point from this film. Very well done. You're 31. You had your debut feature was Clear Cut about your hometown of Philomath, Oregon. Now you've won this Heavy Glass Award from Sundance. What are you working on next?
Oh, I have no idea.
You have that luxury.
I'm taking a little break, I think, and then then I'll start on something, I'm sure.
How does it feel at 31 to be a prominent filmmaker?
It feels great, but I just want to make sure I keep going on. No, it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. I feel very fortunate.
Well, kudos to you, as I said, for completing a film project to begin with. I know how hard that is, and to have two great ones under your belt, including this one, How to Die in Oregon. Again, all of you folks can see it on HBO on May 26th. Our guest has been Peter Richardson, filmmaker. Peter, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.